Has there been a clampdown on journalists' ability to report events in Ethiopia? Ethiopian journalists in exile tell a tale of increasing restriction on press freedoms, with journalists required to reveal their sources under threat of punishment. Africa Today explores how the perceived threat of terrorism appears to have cast a cloud over Ethiopia's expression of press freedom. Joining me, Vuyiswa will be a knowledgeable panel of analysts looking at whether press freedom is under attack in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia's counter-terrorism and media law has drawn criticism worldwide, especially from human rights organizations. The government enacted legislation ahead of this year's elections in May. According to the Human Rights Watch, the law could classify political speech and peaceful protest as terrorist acts. The new law considers as acts of terrorism damage to property and disruption to public services. It strips journalists of the right to protect the identity of their sources. The deputy head of the Office for Government Communication Affairs, Shimeles Kemal, said the new law requires journalists to disclose the sources of their information when reporting on terrorism. The law will restrict the activities of opposition parties in the run-up to the elections and place reporting restrictions on journalists whose work are not in favor of Prime Minister Meles Zenawi's Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF. In 2005's elections, in which Mr. Zenawi's ruling EPRDF retained political power, several protesters, political party leaders, journalists, and human rights activists were arrested. There is a fear that this new law could lead to similar instances in the elections this year. With this law likely to erode freedom of expression in that country, Africa Today asks, is press freedom under attack in Ethiopia in the name of security?
Hello and welcome to Africa Today with me, Vuyiswa. Joining me to discuss the new counter-terrorism laws in Ethiopia are Mr. Negussie Gamma, an exiled Ethiopian journalist and also chairman of the Exiled Ethiopian Free Press Journalist Support Group here in the UK. And on my right is Mr. Bekele Teklu, opposition member of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could you give us a context, Mr. Gamma, as to what was happening in Ethiopia to lead up to this new, seemingly more draconian law?
Yeah, the law in the first place is basically designed to restrict the constitutional rights of the people of Ethiopia, and including press freedom, which is, of course, even if the proclamation is anti-terrorism, it is just a law, a bill that would restrict the people's right of freedom of expression. Mm-hmm. And it gives right to the government, to authorities, to imprison for up to 20 years of time, and simply without any cause, if they do have, if they consider it as a reasonable belief that a terrorism act could take place,
right.
Such as...
Well, to put it into context, are you surprised by such a law, or do you feel it's very much in tune with how the government has behaved?
I mean, in my position, I don't see, the need for the anti-terrorism law in Ethiopia. In the first place, the criminal code itself can do, but by its nature, this government is anti any form of opponent, be it violent or not. If we look at how they define terrorism, just the proclamation states that anyone who, with the purpose of advancing a political, religious, or ideological cause and intending to influence the government, intimidate the public or section of the public to destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, constitutional, economic, social, institutional of the country, commits an act that causes death or serious injury, an act that creates risk to the safety or health of the public, kidnapping or hostage-taking, serious damage to the property, damage to the natural resource, the environment, and so on.
All bases seem to be covered.
Will be subject to punishment by rigorous imprisonment from 15 years to life or with death.
Okay, well, we did try to get the government's point of view. I mean, we just heard a very wordy statement, which is an expression of the law. We got in touch with the Ethiopian embassy, but they refused to participate in the program, nor were able to give us a statement. They just reiterated that the law is crystal clear as written and, as you've just heard, read there by Mr. Teklu. So what is this perception of terrorism, Mr. Gamma, that the government is talking about? Is it to do with the US agenda around, you know, an axis of terrorism within the Horn of Africa, or is it something separate? Do you see a relationship between the two?
It is completely, you know, to grip in power, I mean, to stay in power. The ruling party intentionally do that. Only to restrict the democratic activities of the opposition group. Whoever writes, publishes, edits anything or that an information that advances or supports an act of terrorism is punished. Well, and there is no and there is no way of justifying that. The police, the government security forces are given discretionary rights to seize, search, and I mean, intercept in the media, and without any warranties. And all this is intentionally done, not actually, as Mr. Teklu has said. Ethiopia doesn't need this law in the first place. We do have our own civil law for criminal offenses, but this is intentionally or purposely done to restrict the democratic movement in the country as well as and to safeguard itself.
Well, from what you're both saying, it seems to be part of a pattern, and you're certainly an exiled journalist yourself, one of quite a number of Ethiopian journalists who cannot function in the country. But do you feel that the very specific nature of the way the law is being expressed now has something to do with the upcoming elections in May?
Of course, yes, and beyond that. Let me just explain one point. For instance, there is the so-called code of conduct between some opposition and the EPRDF. At least there is one point that prohibited the opposition from expressing if and obviously that will, the election is abused, to express that to their party or the public. If we relate this to the anti-terrorism law, that means if they express, they signed already there, if they express that the election is abused, that means they try to commit terrorism. And under this law, they will be penalized from 15 years to imprisonment or by days.
Right.
It's not only, okay, it's not only this one. Also, if there is any sort of protest